The memory starts with us trudging along in the woods on a cold and wet winter morning. All around us, tree branches drooped under the burden of heavy snow. It was a Friday before we all went our separate ways. Jordan was leaving for boot camp, Chris to his new job in another state, and Corey and I back to college. We decided on one last adventure together, and although I had a huge distaste for camping, or anything else forest related, my friends managed to convince me to go camping with them for the weekend. "It'll be fun," my best friend Corey had reassured me. We arrived at Moose Brook State Park early that morning and began to unpack. Chris and I started to set up tents at the same time that Jordan and Corey gathered branches for the campfire. By the time all this was set up, it was already 10. Feeling anxious, the group decided on a quick snack before heading out to conquer Mount Jefferson. This small hike had been the sole reason for this trip, so naturally, everyone was excited. Except for me. As I packed my backpack, I thought to myself about all the other things I could be doing instead of spending my last weekend before going back to college, sleeping in a snowy tent. While we continued along the trail, it slowly began to resemble more like an obstacle course because of the boulders we had to maneuver around and the steep rocks we had to scale. Between the numbing coldness of the morning air and the additional effort I had to exert in order to overcome these rocks, I still had enough breath to complain all the way to the top. The day dragged on, and when we finally reached the peak, a sigh of relief washed over everybody. Although the hike was small, it proved to be more challenging than we expected. We broke for a short lunch and simply enjoyed the magnificent view from 1,700 feet high. Completely drained, we all dropped heavily onto a rock as Chris handed everybody a bottle of water and Jordan simultaneously pulled out a variety of fruit. Seconds later, all eyes fell on me. I reached into my bag and felt around inside a pocket. How strange. I was sure the sandwiches would be in there. I glanced back at their patient gazes as panic overcame me while I hopelessly searched one pocket after another. After I had gone through every inch of the bag, I began to double-check each pocket when I slowly realized that just maybe, it was possible that I left the sandwiches inside the cooler back at the campsite. I started to feel like I was in a bad dream. Not only had I moaned all day about the trip, I also forgot to bring everybody's lunch. I slowly looked up at each and every one of them, but before I could utter a single word, Corey handed me some trail mix and they directed their looks toward the beautiful skyline. It was pretty obvious that I forgot the sandwiches, but what really surprised me was their reaction, or lack of it. Not one of them gave me a dirty look or said anything foul. They simply did not want to spoil our last memory by fighting or arguing. For them, this was unlike any other hike. It was not just a way of accepting the changes that were about to unfold, but also realizing that we were blessed to have one another in our lives. During the hike down, I kept to myself and reflected on how I had behaved up to this point. I could not even bring myself to lift my head up. I was too ashamed of my actions, and all I wanted to do was get off this mountain in order to just rest for the day. The others, however, continued to joke and laugh all the way down the trail as if nothing happened. I was not sure if this was their special way of getting back at me, or if they were really over me for getting their food. But judging from the growling stomachs, one thing was for sure. We were all eager to get back to the campsite where our delicious sandwiches would be patiently waiting to be eaten. The rest of that day passed in what felt like an eternity. We sat around the picnic table and played cards for the remainder of the afternoon. Unlike the others, I still felt tense and uneasy about the incident that occurred during the hike. That night, we cooked all the food we had left and enjoyed a big dinner in order to make up for the lacking lunch. Soon after, a campfire was quickly made and everyone rushed over to huddle in the warmth of the crackling fire as the chilly night wind howled at our backs. At first, the chattering of teeth was all that broke the silence around the campfire. "Sorry about today," I eventually managed to say in between chatters. "Don't worry about it. We know it was an accident," Chris said. "Yeah, bro. We were just waiting to see how long it would take before you apologize," Corey added. "I was betting that you weren't even going to apologize by the end of the day," Jordan joked. I was shocked. Not only were they not mad at all about the incident this afternoon, but they have even started to joke about it. Slowly afterwards, the uneasiness lifted just as we began to warm up. At that moment, we finally began to enjoy the trip we were supposed to have all along. I can still picture the four of us roasting marshmallows while Jordan jammed out on his guitar and we reminisced. We talked for hours that night, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy.